he basically said, and then doubled down subsequently in another interview, Trump said that he believed that the enemy was within. He named names, United States Congresspeople, Democrats, who he wanted to put the military on them. How does that land for you? And does it explain why John Kelly would then decide to put all of his hesitancy aside and come forward right now?
Yes, because General John Kelly is a patriot. I don't think anybody at this table would argue with that. He's a man who served his country honorably under tremendous circumstances. He lost his son on the altar of freedom to a landmine in Afghanistan. This is a man who cares very deeply about his country. And many of us have been waiting to hear from him because we've heard all these quotes and anonymous sources, and you wanted to hear the man's voice. And that's what you heard now. And I think he's sounding this alarm a couple weeks out because he's concerned about the future of the country.
Is
and
it
I think
enough
that
for you? Or
I'm already there. I don't need it
Yeah.
to be moved, right? But
Yeah.
I do think it's a culminating storm of people who are sounding the alarm just a couple weeks out because they see how high the stakes are. And it's a chorus now, right? It's General Mark Milley, who is his chairman of the Joint Chiefs. It's his former vice president. It's the former Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney. It's his former Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper. It's basically the entire military and defense community that served under him that is now opposing him. And it's because it's ultimately, in my view, about the commander-in-chief test. And that's what's going to move, especially independent voters, in this next couple of weeks. They're going to go to the booth. It's only going to be them in that switch. And they're going to have to decide if they're comfortable with this person being the commander-in-chief and leading our men and women in uniform, which might include their sons and daughters, which is why the integrity piece and the Atlantic piece and all this other stuff is important, too, because you're voting for the man's character and integrity or their lack of.
I think you can't ignore the fact that so many of these people, to Paul's point, are in the national security space. Those are the people who are the most concerned about this. And some of these stories we've heard before, but here is John Kelly talking more about this episode, or these episodes, he says, there were multiple of them, in which Trump disparaged people who were wounded in action, who were captured in their service. Here's what he said.
He basically said to you that those who died for America on the battlefield were losers and suckers, and he said it more than once.
Yes, but he would say it would always, that something else would get him going, oftentimes again McCain. But he never could wrap his arms around why people would serve the country in uniform. What was in it for them? That was the general theme.
What was in it for them?
It's his voice. I mean, he wants there to be no doubt that he believes that he saw this happen, he heard this happen. You know, there's been a lot of speculation saying maybe he didn't say that, maybe he doesn't really believe it. Now he's going on the record, you're hearing his voice. He wants everybody in the world to hear his voice. The only person you haven't heard from is General Mattis. He's kind of the last holdout that people want to hear from. Maybe we'll hear from him and others in these final days, but that would be just about the only voice that served under him that hasn't spoken out in opposition of him in the last couple of months or years. We're talking about whether or not mostly independents in key swing states, many of which are veterans, are going to determine this election. They're going to decide, and they're going to judge on character, they're going to judge on the commander-in-chief test, and they're going to judge on how they ultimately feel about safety and security. And this may impact that decision. That's why Kelly's speaking out now. He wants you to know how he stands. And there may be others who will speak out in the next couple of days. We're not past another October surprise, but he wants everybody to hear it, and he wants it to be one of the last things you hear before you go to the polls.
So I'll just say this, having spent some time with the president, I was the chairman of the American Battle Monuments Commission. I was there with General Kelly and General Dunford and at Ain Marne Cemetery. The story that the Atlantic wrote, not the story today, but the previous story about suckers and losers is complete fiction. Zach Fuentes and Dan Walsh and others who canceled the trip before Donald Trump, that starts out, Donald Trump canceled the trip to the cemetery. It was pouring rain. There was no way to get there, a 2-hour drive in a car. I went with General Kelly. I went with General Dunford. I went with others to the cemetery as the chairman. I went to the top of the hill. November 10th is the Marine Corps birthday. That is sacred ground. Ain Marne Cemetery, sacred ground. It's a Bellawood Cemetery, not Ain Marne. I wanted to go to the Ain Marne Cemetery. Bellawood Cemetery is the Marine Corps. There's a monument at the top. I went to the top there with some other staffers. We drank a shot in honor of General Kelly's son. There was no talk about how terrible Donald Trump was at that time. I'm not doubting. Listen, I'm not doubting. Listen, I'm not doubting. Hold on.
Don't you
now.
Listen, I'm not talking about.
Just as a question here, I know that this is
I have
your
very
view
strong
on
feelings.
this.
I've been with him a lot. I've been with Trump a lot.
We've talked about it a lot. But do you acknowledge that John Kelly was the chief of staff. He was with
Honorable
Trump
man.
More
at
than-
every moment. Do you acknowledge that you may not have been there for that moment,
I'm
or
saying
any
my
of the-
experience,
or any of the other moments that John Kelly
absolutely.
says where this
I do not doubt General Kelly's word in one sec. There's context of things, and I'm just telling you, in the many times that I've been with the president in military settings, every Army Navy game, I went with the president. I greeted wounded warriors and their families, Gold Star families, with the president. I introduced them to the president in the stadium, in the White House, and other places, out of earshot of people. I saw firsthand how he interacted with these people, wounded, badly disfigured soldiers, their families, dead people, dead kids. I mean, terrible situations. So my firsthand experience is something different. I'm not dismissing General Kelly's experience.
But
We
I'm
also
just
have
speaking
our
to
own,
mine.
we also
I'm
have our
speaking to
own,
mine. Just for one
we also
second,
have
just
our
for
own
one
personal
second.
experience
Yeah.
of witnessing what he says
That's right.
year after year.
That's right.
You were there. I respect your opinion, and you saw that. But I also saw what he said about John McCain,
and
I saw what he
also-
continues to say consistently
Yeah.
about not just military people, but all kinds of people. I did an interview earlier today. I wouldn't want him around my kids because not only are our enemies watching, and not only are our troops watching, our children are watching. And this is a person we expect to represent the office with honor and integrity. And that's something we've all seen for years and years. And we will all make our judgment when we go to the voting booth.
Sometimes you come on TV and you kind of prepare for what you are supposed to say or should say. And I don't know if there's been a time where I felt more ill-equipped to participate in the discussion. Because you have people at the table who, unlike Scott, myself, and Ashley, who have given close to what Abraham Lincoln called the last full measure of devotion. And what I would ask viewers and everyone else is to take the totality of the circumstances. At this point in time, I'm not like a CNN political commentator. I'm a voter who just needs to hear what people are saying who matter. And that means I'm listening to people who are close to Donald Trump. And look, I love David Irvin. I know him well. I mean, I trust David with my family. I don't know if I do the same with Donald Trump, and that's my personal opinion. That's the way I vote. I just met him a minute ago, and he has on a much better looking suit than I do right now at this particular point in time.
You got some sharp shoes on.
But what I'm saying is that I think that we have to take the totality of circumstances, because sometimes those of us who want to weigh in, and I want to be here and be like, you know, Kamala Harris made a tough decision in Afghanistan and this, that, but I don't know what that feels like for you two.
I guess I wonder, here's the thing that I wonder. I mean, I hear what you're saying about you didn't have those experiences. But someone else did.
And I'm not
Someone
dismissing
else,
them. I'm not downplaying them.
So someone else did. So you're hearing that someone else actually did, multiple other people actually. Again, I come back to this. If you heard that about somebody and you personally didn't, it's like, you know, you didn't personally witness the person that you've known for your whole life doing something really wrong, but someone else did. Someone was victimized by it. Do you discount that as a he said, she said?
No, look, I think you know, as Bakari said, it's totality of circumstance. Everybody has to weigh and make their decision. That's the great thing about a democracy, right? You hear all these things, and everybody's going to go in on November 5th, and they're going to make a decision. And what I think, you know, Joe Biden once said, you know, this was his line, you know, don't compare me against the Almighty, compare me against the alternative. And I think that's what's happening in this
That's
case.
all we want.
That's all we want.
And listen, I think
if I'm comparing anyone
I understand.
to ever say that Hitler did something good, then the alternative is better. And I think that's what I think, and I guess I just keep asking the question, what is ever going to be disqualifying for Donald Trump?
Nothing.
So if you actually knew he said it,
Well, I don't know.
I'm not saying I don't know if you know.
It's a
None of
terrible
us
thing,
will
yeah.
ever know,
But
right?
by focusing
But, like,
only on the one thing he said,
But I agree,
we
yes.
are being distracted.
It's
from
not
all
an
the false
isolated
crap. How
event.
far do you have to go
That's
It's
right.
to
not an
lose Dick
isolated.
Cheney?
That's
Very,
right.
How
very
far do
little
you
of
have to
this
go to
is
lose your own
isolated,
Secretary of
to your
Defense?
point.
How far do you have to go to lose your own Chairman of the
staff.
Joint Chiefs? That is something we've never seen before. And that is something, regardless of what he said on one given circumstance, should resonate with
Why
people,
would you say this?
especially
Just this point.
Very last
How
word.
bad must it be then for 50% of Americans to say, yeah, I'm going to vote for him over Kamala because we think the alternative
Right
is
now
far
it's
worse.
at 46 and some change.
Hey,
But we'll see.
this is a choice for most Americans, and
It is a
especially most
choice.
independents. They don't like either one of them.
I think
and
that-
that is the case for Kamala Harris to make, to say, you may not like me, but he's a lot worse. And
We can't-
he's trying to make the same case. And we're going to see how it shakes
We
out.
cannot lose sight, I mean, to what you just said, of the unprecedented nature of this whole conversation.